Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. My name is Tom Palomaki. I am the Chief Customer Officer here at Spirion, and I'm very excited to introduce one of our great customers and one with a very recognizable name and brand. I'm sure everyone recognizes the Harvard Business School, perhaps the preeminent business school in the world, with a list of faculty and alumni that includes many of the most distinguished and respected business people in the world. So we'll have a fairly informal fireside chat today with our guest, Chris, followed up by a short demonstration of the Spirion Sensitive Data Platform. In your BrightTalk browser window, you will see a question mark icon where you can ask questions live. Just type them in there and submit. If you do enter any questions, we'll make sure we get you answers during that session. So let's jump right in. I'm very pleased to introduce Chris Pringle. Chris is the Information Security Officer and Managing Director for IT Compliance at the Harvard Business School. Now, Chris, I know you're in Boston, and we were just chatting a little bit earlier. You guys just suffered through a pretty nasty nor'easter that came in last night. Heard a lot of people out of power, and having been in Boston when those things come through, I guess you're probably glad it's rain and not snow.
Yeah, well, I like the snow, but not this early.
Yeah. So, Chris, just for the audience here, can you walk us through your Spirion journey? I think you guys started out with Spirion with our original product, Identity Finder, quite some time ago.
Yeah.
What was the driver behind partnering with Spirion in the first place, and kind of tell us how that relationship has evolved?
Well, my predecessor, before I took over this job, I managed all the infrastructure for the campus for many years. My predecessor on the security side brought it in so we could manage endpoints in regards to data leakage and really ensure that we met our policy in regards to what data should be on there and what shouldn't be on there. And the goal was to help people within our community, our faculty and staff, be aware if there was data on there for them to take action on that. So it was a self-service model when it was put in place. And it has worked really well for us. We've had folks that, when they found that there was data on their systems, they didn't know it was there, or they forgot it was there, and it's been very helpful. So we started this, I forget how many years ago, and we've evolved over time. And the relationship has grown over time, from the support mechanism to the success of of where we're at today with our environment, supporting our faculty and staff. So it's been, I can't count the years, but it's worked very well for our community and targeted individuals that are dealing with PII information.
So I'm curious. I hear from a lot of Spirion's customers and people we talk to when they first start discovering data. Were there any surprises? You probably can't go into any specifics, but any surprises with the amount of data or types of sensitive data that you found throughout the school?
I wouldn't call it surprises. I'd call it informational or educational to help people understand that people try to get their jobs done. And my role as on the information security is I don't want to be a roadblock. We're a research group institution, so we want to tread with I wouldn't say lightly, but have empathy and be able to engage for collaboration. So this was more of an educational experience for people to say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. I didn't realize that was there, or I didn't realize I was doing that." So it was a combination of information for the institution that shouldn't have been where it was found, and also personal information, because we have to do our daily lives too, even though it's in the middle of the workday at lunchtime. So there was stuff that was found that was personal related that were, I would call aha moments to say, "Oh Jesus, it's time for me to think about really what I'm doing and where I'm storing stuff."
Yeah, so that's a great point. And so one of the things I was reading earlier this week, I know that the Harvard Business School just released an online course this summer in data privacy, and they talk about some of the ethical and practical concerns about data privacy, but also that data privacy is a cultural thing. It's cultural awareness. You mentioned a lot of your users didn't realize they may have had certain pieces of sensitive information out throughout their or on their endpoint. How is Harvard Business School addressing some of those cultural issues as well as you evolve?
Well, we go through consistent educational awareness. This is actually the month of October is Security Awareness Month. So we engage on an annual basis during this month and through to Thanksgiving. But we also consistently engage with our departments. My team, myself, uh, don't want to people to forget. Security is everybody's business, and if you lose track of that, then you're really not aware of what it is you're doing and where you're moving data to. So it's really just to keep it in the forefront, and it's a consistent message that we try to be in front of people in small groups, in department meetings, just to keep their mind on it. Now, more so with the hybrid environment that we're in, where people are mixing both personal devices, home-based networks, and business. So it's even more important for you to be absolutely aware of what you're doing.
Would you say that the primary use cases that you leverage the Spirion solution for have evolved over the last few years? In other words, are there any additional business challenges beyond the original use case that you've been able to address?
I wouldn't call it business challenges. I see it. I see where we've hit our limit on the current product that we're on right now, which is the on-prem environment, and the ability to move into a service within a cloud service that expands our capabilities is really what I'm looking at to support a hybrid environment and not just a local on campus, and also to meet needs from privacy compliance across the globe. GDPR is the big one, POPIA in South America, and we also have the new one. I can't remember the acronym for it in China that I guess goes live next month. So we work with our global partners within our community and have global offices. And I see that where we're going with this will tie into that, which is on top of our endpoint management. So we have our baseline at the endpoint level, and then we want to grow this as we move into the global realm and the data classification side.
So when you say grow beyond the endpoint, you're obviously talking about a number of other centralized or disparate data sources, whether it's cloud data or databases, structured, unstructured. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is, and it's one where we have to walk before we can run. And I think you and I chatted briefly about this, that you can't eat the elephant in one bite, and there's just so much to consume with the product. And we're starting that consumption with our baseline to move to the next level, and then add the other components in a consumable fashion that we can roll out to our community and our individuals. So we understand not only the user experience, but we also understand the use cases to help and support our community.
Great. So, Chris, the sensitive data platform, as you know, is our Spirion's newest SaaS-based evolution of the flagship product, the on-prem product that you've been using for a while. How do you anticipate the SaaS platform improving the operation or performance or just the overall user experience?
Well, the end goal is to have this be a utility service and just baked into the environment. So it's basically the light switch goes on, the light goes on. So in the past, we've had this more of a manual user enacted experience. And the goal would be to remove it from the user side and have it as an automatic or automatic side, where eventually we can have policies in place that will either alert individuals or take action, so that basically we can work smarter and not harder, and also roll it out in a consumable fashion, like I mentioned. And then second of all, it adds a breadth of other services that you mentioned very briefly that we can migrate into across our ecosystem, which is what we don't have today. So it basically fills a gap that we'll have to do over a period of time.
Great, and I think we're talking about just some of the additional beyond just the basic sensitive data discovery, which Spirion does at a a very high accuracy rate. That's been well documented. I think we're talking about adding some capabilities around data classification, so that information, that metadata tags can be leveraged by other systems that you're currently using, as well as maybe automating some things like remediation at some point. So plans to do that kind of thing in the future?
Absolutely, yeah. That's a big hot button for me in regards to data protection, and I'm not afraid to state that it's an area where we need to focus and improve. It's probably a challenge for any organization. There's just so many places where data can go. The endpoint is just one spot, and now the fact that we've accelerated this transformation based on pandemic to be hybrid mode and data movement from a cloud perspective, and that's exploding. We've been in cloud for a while, but now we need to look at how do we manage that? How do we classify know the data classification is, which we have manual models for and spreadsheets and processes, but it's not an automatic process. So I look at this as being able to help us improve that. And like I mentioned, to put the automation around it and the alerting, that would make us much more proactive than reactive. The current environment allows us to be reactive, so we can look at something after the fact versus in real time and take action appropriately.
Great. So, Chris, are there any other specific things that can convince you to make the move to the SaaS-based platform?
Well, I want to work smarter and not harder, and
Mm-hmm.
and there's costs associated with that, and being able to get rid of infrastructure on the back end and have the management of that, where we can focus on other things that are more important, is really a big deal for me. So that takes that out of the picture by moving into the SDP and leveraging the SaaS service. So one of the big things is the CapEx versus the OpEx side of the house. And my feeling is you don't necessarily save money going to the cloud. However, you transfer your CapEx expenditures over to an operational subscription model, and it may be a cost savings from the service side, but I look at it from a cost savings from a resource side, so that you can work smarter and engage resources from your team or other teams on areas that are much more important once you get this in place. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. It's complicated, and that's why you've got to really have a good roadmap and a plan to execute this in a fashion that's consumable. We have limited resources. My team is small. The IT team is larger, but my team rolls this out. So I've got 5 people on my team across multiple different services. So we have to, again, be smarter and about how we move and work with these products to make our community more protected from a data perspective, but also be able to be proactively addressing things in a timely fashion.
Sure. In that regard, Chris, I don't think you're any different than most other organizations out there, right? It's you have to figure out how you do more with fewer resources.
Yeah, more with less.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes automation and having the automation being based on business policy so important.
I mean, the key here is to put this in front of our community to help them be even more aware. And the other driving factor is the current environment has to be you have to be on our campus network in order for it to function appropriately. So if you're remote, you have to be on VPN. So the SaaS service eliminates that, and it truly becomes a service that we can spread across our community globally without having to be on our corporate network or campus network.
Great. Chris, you had brought up a couple of data privacy regulations just a short time ago, like GDPR and CPRA and the new Chinese regulations that are coming out. Regarding some of these specific use cases around compliance, how do you plan to have your team leverage Spirion maybe to help with some of those departments where they're collecting sensitive data, where you have to process things like subject rights requests and those types of things that are submitted?
Well, what we started a while ago, when prior to GDPR and after GDPR went into effect, was I would call it an in-depth review of at least what we knew at the time of data that we classified as important for GDPR and part of a DSAR or DSAR. And we have that in a manual spreadsheet, for a better term, for the applications and what data is classed, what data is protected there or gathered there, and it's kind of a web. So my goal here is to put some automation around that, and then be able to do reporting. So when a report comes in or a request comes in, that this goes through a central channel. Not just by department, but it would help leverage the departments to provide access into responding up through to the central folks that will be reporting back out to the respondent or the requestor, so that we could not take 60 days or 30 days to respond to these things. And to be honest, the first one we went through took 30 days, and then we had to do another 30, which you can do within a GDPR perspective. But it was a lot of time and a lot of effort. So that's not going to happen right off the bat when we light this up, but it's something where I want to get to. The classification models that we have of the data in our applications, we know, but it's really putting the wrapper and the bow on top of that from the Spirion is what Spirion is going to do for us.
Okay, great. So, Chris, obviously you're in a period of transition right now, going from an on-prem solution to just beginning to go down the SaaS path, with some of the basic functionality, core functionality of being able to do scans on endpoints today. You mentioned plans to expand the different data sources that you're going to be scanning. You talked about some plans to add some automated classification and potentially remediation, and then adding things like some of the data privacy, being able to respond to subject rights requests and that sort of thing. In addition to all that, which is a lot, and like you said, you got to bite the elephant one bite at a time, right? You don't want to take on all that all at once.
Yeah.
Are there additional things you see in the future for Harvard Business School when it comes to just being able to protect that what matters most, that sensitive data, and what do you see in your crystal ball for data privay in higher education in general?
Wow, $5 million. I don't know how to answer that question. It's very open-ended. I'm looking out within the next year or two, and really, it's knowing that where we're currently at today is never going to go backwards, and to put the tools in place to understand where the data is flowing and where it's going from the endpoint, from the application, so that we can catch stuff in the event that it's going to the wrong spot, or that if there is truly a leak, that we can understand where that is going, or that it's happening, and we can take appropriate action. I wouldn't look at this as a silver bullet. And again, this is not easy. It's complicated and difficult. But really, it's being able to evolve and grow with the business and with the services that are out there, with the different cloud services, whether you're Google, whether you're Oracle, whether you're AWS, whether you're O365 or whatever other service where your data is residing, to be able to have hooks into that. And that's really important to me, is, and especially on the Spirion side, is the growth and the relationships with these other third parties to make the system truly adaptable, to be able to manage data and data movement.
Great. No, that's really good. So I was going to make a salesy joke about the $5 million. I won't do that. But one of the things I do want to ask you is that a lot of times one of the challenges a lot of our other customers, particularly in the commercial space, but I can see this also in higher ed. But one of the challenges they shared with us is how do you prove to your board of directors, board of trustees, et cetera, that there's value in protecting this type of data? How do you quantify the impact that protecting privacy has? Is it based on the being in compliance with regulations? Is it other types of measurements?
Well, in a bunch of these, I've done TCOs and had worked work with vendors to do TCOs, but it's understanding what you're trying to protect and putting a value on that data that you're trying to protect. And how do you message that up to the senior levels of that, and what the risk is, the what if scenarios. So, we've walked through that here over the last couple of years, understanding, between IP and data privacy, and what the risks are associated with data leakage, depending on what it is. You pay a price for that. So, if someone truly wants something, they're going to get it, is the way I look at it. But how can you put protections around this and quantify the value associated with that? And I think it's not one size fits all. But based on your business, you have to be able to quantify the value of your data. And if you split it up into segments, whether it's personal data, student data, transcriptions, alumni, research, and understand what their risks are, not only to brand and reputation, but also to financial loss, is kind of important. Sorry, I got a phone call going off. It's kind of important to be able to establish what that could be and put basically a high-level discussion with senior leaders to understand that.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I've done that across the board with folks here. So I wouldn't. It's a story, right? You've got to start, and you've got to move up to that. It's just not something that happens overnight.
Sure. No, that's great. Chris, I know we wanted to keep this to 20 minutes. I really appreciate your insights. I think you've had some very thoughtful responses to some of the questions that I asked, and I certainly appreciate the longstanding partnership between Harvard Business School and Spirion. So thanks so much for taking the time to join us today and share your experience. I don't see any questions from the audience at this point, but what we do have is, we talked a little bit about moving towards some of that automation and some of the changes in the SaaS platform. One of the big changes is in the user interface and the ability to create what we call playbooks and orchestrate the automation of that, either whether it's discovery or classification or remediation. And I've asked Corey Rutherford. Corey is an advisory systems engineer here at Spirion. I've asked Corey to kind of give the audience a brief demonstration of the power of playbooks. So Corey, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks everybody for joining us today. So yeah, to kind of lead off of what Chris has been mentioning today, fundamentally, the goal or the objectives for his organization are to essentially lean on the automation of our technology from a SaaS platform perspective, and really reduce or minimize the amount of effort or time it takes to get to a state where you can automate, let's say, business policy, procedure, and various other aspects of the organization. And we can help with that process by using a technology we call playbooks. Playbooks is essentially a tool that can be used, or a process that can orchestrate and automate different values of outcomes. So for example, if in particular, Chris was talking a lot about data classification as an example. So one of the things that we have found working with different organizations is that data classification is very useful into identifying and putting value to that data, but it can be difficult to actually implement or orchestrate. So what Spirion can do out of the box, it can take the, let's say, written policy that organizations have. So probably very familiar to most of us on this call here, is that in our organization, we steward data in different ways. However, we do assign a value to that data. So for example, the most valuable data in this particular use case could be your critical data. That could include different types of data, such as social security numbers, passwords, driver's license number, patient records, or restricted data such as your faculty and staff data, or your typical public data that anybody can get access to, your usernames, your employee name, job title, and things like that. So what Spirion can do is can automate the process of actually classifying that data. So for example, if particular types of data are found to sit within, let's say, the critical data classification, what Spirion can do is it can automate a process to actually assigning a classification to that data. So essentially what happens is that we have a technology here that allows you a visually driven process to very simply implement your IT business policy, like we were just looking at here. So in this particular scenario, we take the scenario that we're looking for what we call critical data. Now, what we name our sensitivity or the different types of data in an organization, that's going to be different from one organization to the next. But for example, let's say that we have an organization that's looking for critical data, and that critical data can contain information like what we're seeing here. So all inclusive, if you find this types of data, this would be considered critical in nature or as a category 4 type data. And the outcome of that can proceed in different ways. So we have these decision trees processes that can basically say, if you don't find critical data, so those particular types of sensitive data, then what we're going to do is we're going to automate a process of classification. And in this case, we're just going to apply no classification to those particular files or documents. If we do find that data, what we can do is we can automate a process of saying, let's go ahead and classify that data as critical. In addition to that, Chris's point is being able to notify different individuals of this as well. So as data is being discovered, being able to reduce the amount of time being spent in reports, you can actually provide these notification processes that allow you to alert the appropriate users within an organization, the different roles within an organization. And this is really what helps you automate a process of classification of data. So for example, as data is being discovered throughout your organization, what we can help improve upon is the awareness, right? So again, back to Chris's point, what he's trying to do is improve the awareness, not only by the end users, but also just by the types of data that exist within your organization. So as Spirion finds this particular type of information, it can classify it automatically, and it can also classify it based off of the types of regulation or regulated data within an organization. So if the particular types of data have, let's say, national insurance numbers that are specific to the UK, or if it has credit card information, which could also be PCI regulated data. Again, what Spirion's doing is it's finding fundamentally the sensitive data in the documents, either by themselves or in combination of other types of data. And what it's doing is it's classifying that data automatically. Now we can take it a step further as well. So going back to the playbooks, we've got different outcomes of values. To Chris's point around GDPR, for example. So again, taking the lift, minimizing the lift that is required to find, let's say, GDPR data, playbooks can actually orchestrate a process of you asking the questions, is this Article 9 type of data? If it's not, again, we can take a decision, take no action to that. But let's say that there was Article 9 data found. So you could start to ask questions, was this found in a structured repository, or was this found in an unstructured repository? Or more importantly, was this data found on a workstation, right? So inappropriate storage of this particular type of sensitive data. So if it was structured data, you could apply different classifications, like your GDPR Article 9 data. Again, you can alert the prospective individuals, and you can take other types of actions. So what you're doing is you're taking a number of written policy and orchestrating or operationalizing this process automatically. So again, you can work smarter, right? Again, to Chris's point. So the whole idea here is to be able to automate the processes around this, and it can go as far as did we find PII data? So PII data is really anything that's personally identifiable to an individual, a student in his case. It could be faculty, staff, whomever. And again, what we're doing is we're applying these different procedures based around the different types of data that are located. And playbooks is foundational to that. We can go as far as asking questions, are we finding PCI data in different locations? So being able to orchestrate processes around that. So if, for example, you've got different processes, you're working with your QSA just to validate or to discover if there's PCI data in locations where it shouldn't be. Again, you can classify information, or you can start to invoke different processes to protect that data. So for example, if you find data in data repositories that aren't appropriate for the storage of, let's say, credit card information, what you can do is you can notify or you can take action on that particular types of data. So we've already looked at classification, but you can assign responsibility of that data to the appropriate stewards within an organization. You can notify the appropriate individuals. And you can also apply different types of processes to automate the protection of that data, such as quarantining information. So a great example of quarantining is if you find data, let's say on SharePoint, and that particular data shouldn't exist there, then that data can be moved to an appropriate storage location for the interim, like a file server on-prem or something like that. Or if your OneDrive location is appropriate storage for that, you can have it moved to that location. And then whatever disposition actions occur after that, can be provided through the movement of this data. We can also shred data. So if data is found in out of policy locations, Spirion can automate the process of deleting that data. Great example of this would be if FERPA type of data are found within, say, an Exchange inbox. So let's say that there was data that was being moved out of, whatever, the Oracle warehouse where a data extract has occurred, and you're trying to, identify different student processes. And within that email is an extract of that data. And of course, Exchange is probably not appropriate storage for that type of information. Then Spirion can basically find that information with that Exchange environment and shred it, delete it. So what you're doing there is that you're minimizing the effort to have to find that data, and you're minimizing the effort to actually reduce that footprint of risk, potentially leading to, an incident, a leakage of data, breach, and so forth. And then we can also redact information. So redacting information, again, back to Chris's point earlier, is that the idea is finding the right level of security, but at the same time not interrupting the business process. So a great example of redaction of data is, let's say that data has been copied. We're in a COVID-19 era. We're working on the fringe, the edge of all of our technologies. The firewalls really aren't there anymore, right? The edge is gone. So our SaaS solution allows us to connect to, let's say, workstations anywhere around the world. If there's internet, we can connect to it, and that's a fantastic improvement over the on-prem, right? So now we've got connection to any device that's out there. So what ends up happening is, let's say that I'm a user and I'm copying the information from a file server within my organization. So let's say within Harvard, and this information is copied to my desktop. I just need to do some basic, analysis of data and things like that. What Spirion can do is that it can allow this document to be copied to that device, but at the same time, it can also redact particular types of data that may not be appropriate to leave that source of truth, that file server where that data is appropriately stored. So what you're doing is you're still allowing your end users to do their job without interrupting their business process. At the same time, you're keeping the threat of risk at a minimal, so reducing the footprint of risk as well. And those are just some examples of how playbooks work. And that's a process that can help facilitate this automation that Chris is talking about, where he wants to get to the next process of being able to classify data automatically. So if data is found within a data repository, your end users can see that classification through these visual indicators. So these icons indicate the sensitivity of that data. So if you remember back to this example, if we apply or if we designate a particular type of sensitivity to the document by color, what ends up happening is Spirion can apply those colors to these documents. And then as an end user, I actually see the business value of that data before I even have to open it. This can be critical in making decisions, as a regular employee, let's say of Harvard or any other location, should I share this data with people outside my organization? If the business policy or practice is not to share critical data, this can inform the end user that they probably shouldn't do that. Or you can automate processes not allowing that. Integration of other tool sets and different security technologies within the security program and so forth. So there's a lot of value that comes from data classification, including being able to orchestrate and automate different protection processes that we've looked at here. The sky's the limit, really, with these playbooks. The whole idea is being able to operationalize and automate the business outcomes. So you're taking policy that you may have on written paper and trying to automate this process. You've got an Excel document that has all the different types of sensitive data in an organization, and you've got classification around that. But how do you get that to a point where you can operationalize that? Well, you do that with Spirion, right? So we apply classification based off of these one-to-one types of data within the particular environment that you're running within. And as I scroll through here, you can see there's a lot of different types of examples of how this works. So foundationally to this whole process is finding the sensitive data. And that's what we've done here. We can also take it a step further in a process to Chris's point, where he's starting to see subject access requests. So for example, to be able to satisfy a subject access request, you have to fundamentally find the sensitive data within your organization. So what ends up happening is that our platform finds the sensitive data, and then what Finder does is it associates that sensitive data to a particular student or employee or consumer and so forth. So Within your organization, you can, if you have a consumer or someone asking for the types of information that you're collecting on them, your analyst can put in very quickly the first, last name. They can choose upon the different regulation types. So if it's GDPR related, request type for an informative, or a more erasure type of process, or a comprehensive type of report, including some other data elements. So like the driver's license number, you have to validate that the person asking for this data really is, Corey Rutherford, myself. So you'll have other information as part of that process, such as driver's license and maybe your address and things like that. And what ends up happening is that allows you to then tie that data to the individuals requesting information about them. And this is really what helps you minimize or reduce the amount of effort. Something would have taken 60 days, to Chris' point again, 2 rounds of 30 days. We can reduce that quite significantly because you're able to very quickly have your analyst review the data that's found by Spirion, and then it basically approve or disapprove or flag it in different ways. And then by doing that, you satisfy that subject access request. So Tom, with that, I'm gonna leave that open to any questions or anything else we might want to review.
Corey, thanks. You
Absolutely
covered a lot of ground in a little bit less than 15 minutes, and tied all of it back to some of the conversation that we had with Chris earlier, right? So everything from not just being able to find the data that's out there on endpoints or potentially other locations, but then applying some very, very intuitive, from a user interface perspective, applying some rules and some workflows around what to do to help automate some of the classification and potentially remediation of those things. And the other thing that Chris had mentioned and I had discussed was some of the things around how to change the culture, how to make sure that the end users are aware that they're working with data that might be sensitive. And I think the visual representation of that can go a long way towards helping develop some of those cultural aspects that are required to be successful. And then thanks for touching on the being able to process subject rights requests as well. Again, in order to be able to respond to a subject rights request, you have to be able to know where all that sensitive data for that individual might be. So great job in covering all that in just about 15 minutes. Chris, any comments that you'd like to bring up around that quick walkthrough of the technology?
I don't know if I have any additional comments, but I just say I look forward to progressing forward with this and a relationship. I'm looking forward to moving this forward. I'm tongue-tied. What can I say?
Well, fantastic. Listen, Corey, thank you. And Chris, thank you so much for joining us again. It's just a pleasure to have you share your experience with Spirion so far and kind of talk about the reasons that you're continuing the journey and moving forward with adding more capability through the platform and moving to the SaaS environment. So thanks again. I don't see any questions here. If anybody does have any questions, please go to Spirion.com, and there's a live chat. If you have any questions related to this, feel free to ask them, and we would love to help you address them as quickly as possible. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And once again, Chris, always a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you sometime soon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye now.